Hey there guys, how's it going for today? Another EDH tips here for today, and today we're doing tips on upgrading a precon deck. Alright, so we are discussing how you should upgrade a precon deck. Now there's a million variant different ways to upgrade different decks, and every deck is a bit different. There's so many different archetypes and like tokens, like Voltron, tribal decks and all this other stuff. There's werewolves, there's vampires, there's zombies, there's so much out there. We'll be here all day just listing all the different things that are out there in the world of Magic and EDH. But again, just take it back to more simple things, because I always think that, when you're upgrading a deck, what you're actually doing is trying to, quote-unquote, sand away some rough edges for the most part. Now, again, as I've sort of said, for the most part, and as we all roughly at least know, that most of the decks that we get, they'll have some cards that just don't do anything with what we're actually doing in the deck with our commander, or with the other cards that really work well with what our commander's doing. They're just in there for, I don't know, for the fact that they really couldn't find anywhere else to put them, or didn't know where else to print them, or whatnot. They're just sort of in the deck for fun, or for flavor, or for maybe somebody who, again, picks up the deck and goes, wow, this is a cool card. I'd actually like this card. Maybe I'll do something with it, and I'll put it to the side and think about it, later on and see what happens. But, regardless, again, as I always say with a lot of these things, I'm going to assume that most people, when I'm discussing these videos and whatnot, you roughly know how to play the game of Magic the Gathering. I'm not going to go through, how do you play a land, or how do you draw a card, and things like this, or how do I play an instant, or when can I play an instant, and things like this. I'm not going to go through, too many of the rules, interactions, when does damage wear off, things like this, whatnot. I'm assuming that you will know how to play the game. So I'm just taking it back to, basics of, what you should look for when you're looking at your precon deck and you're saying, okay, cool, these are the sorts of things that I want to look for when I'm looking at my precon deck and I'm going, you know what, I want to try to change this deck. I want to try to make it a little bit better. Maybe I have some cards that I can toss into it that are in my collection. Maybe I don't, but maybe I can, afford, $50 or $100 or whatever to put into this deck, and just make it a little bit better. And maybe I can take out some of these cards that are in there that might be worth a little bit, that I might not really be doing much with, so maybe I can, that can help me with my budget. So we'll wait and see. But again, so the first thing is to look at your CMC, or your converted mana cost, or your mana value of your spells. Okay, this is one of the easiest things to do. If you've got a, let's say, 4 mana kill spell. Now there are some 4 mana kill spells that are okay because they're not really 4 mana, but there are some 4 mana and even more CMC or mana value spells. And again, I'm not going to go through every single thing and discuss what mana value and CMC and all that are. I'm assuming you should roughly know what that is. So again, if you look at a spell and you go, wow, this is an okay spell, and then go, wait a minute, it's 5 mana. Oh yeah, well that's not obviously good because it's 5 mana. Unless it does something else really amazing, it really isn't that worthwhile. You want to go, okay, cool. I want to obviously, again, take anything that's too high of mana value or CMC, whatever, out of this deck and replace it with cheaper mana value or CMC options. And that's, over the whole board. I'm not just talking about removal, I'm talking about ramp, I'm talking about card draw, and I'm mostly talking about creatures as well. Though there are some creatures that you have to be like, well, this is a really key card to what my deck's doing, so, it needs to be in there, and if it's 7 mana, well, it's 7 mana. I can't really get this effect anywhere else. That's the thing. If you can get the effect somewhere else and you can get it cheaper, though you can still run an extra couple copies of some cards, because that's fine, because sometimes you need those extra copies rather than having to run 5 or 6 tutors. It's easier just to run a couple extra copies. Maybe those extra other copies or pseudo copies that I guess aren't as good 100% as, like, say, Cradle Behemoth or something like that, but it still does a fairly decent job, and you can be like, well, this can win the game for me, or could do a whole lot for me in the game, and still is a really key piece to what my deck is doing, because again, this is what I need to do. I need to play Andre's Forerunners, because I do not have a Cradle Behemoth. I have 50 cents, and I don't have $50. Again, so some sacrifices in some areas, it's not the most powerful card that I could be running. No, that's fine. It still does what I need it to do most of the time, and can win me the game in a couple of turns most of the time. So it's not always that you have to take every card out. There are some cards that you go, okay, well, I'm not playing this deck in an optimal way. Again, you don't have to play that way, but you still want to be focused as much as possible on what your deck is actually doing. So if there are cards that are in your deck that certainly don't fit the game plan of what you're doing, you want to take those out as well. So CMC, or mana value, and that does play a huge role in what your deck is like, how it's going to run and how it's going to function for the most part. But more important than that is obviously the functionality of what your deck is actually doing, because when you're talking about efficiency, that is good, but again, for the most part, trading a wrath spell that's 3 mana or whatever for 5 mana, let's say, for one that's for 3 mana, yeah, sure, that's kind of sort of obvious to a degree, but again, is it a realistic option for everyone? Not always. And some people, again, I can say that especially in white, there are a lot of 5 mana board wipes that are quite good, and even there's couple 6-drop ones that, or essentially 6-drop ones, that are really good as well, and offer a lot of flexibility, or a lot more for you when you're at that at that level. It's well, I will take this over this in this case because of the flexibility that it offers me, because essentially what it is a one-sided wrath. It leaves me with what I have, and it just gets rid of what my opponents have, and then I can do whatever I need to do to crack in for the win, or find a way to win, or mill my opponents out, or do whatever. There's always those inherent advantages with some of those spells. It's okay, cool, my deck is playing all enchantments or all enchanted creatures or whatnot, things like this. So a board wipe that kills all non-enchantment creatures is really good, because hey, look, my deck survived everything, and now I have the most advantage. I can get the most ahead, and yeah, sure, maybe I'll pay an extra 2 mana for a asymmetrical board wipe, so that I'm ahead after it. So there are conditions and reasons why you keep certain cards, because they're too asymmetrical, especially board wipes, or they're too good for what they are actually doing, or what they're actually offering you, to the flexibility and whatnot, and things like that. Garrick's Uprising, I think it is, from Eldraine a couple years ago, I think, or it was a year ago, whatever it was. It's a pump spell, but it's also a draw spell. But the thing is, the best thing about it is it's an instant. Like, that's a really great spell. I'm not going to go through every single card, but again, like when you're looking at spells, wow, this is a really great spell because, it can be a pump, which maybe, again, I might need that overrun style of an effect sometimes in the game, but sometimes I'll just need to draw, a whole bunch of cards, and that's the thing, like, if somebody goes to board wipe, again, like, I can sit there and go, okay, cool, well, I'm just going to fire this off and draw a whole bunch of cards and then get, some of my cards back and hope to rebuild next turn, it can really help you out, like when you're closing in on winning the game, it's like, okay, well, I'll give my creatures an extra buff, and now, I'm much closer to winning the game, or if I haven't already won the game, or pretty much already won the game. So, little things like that, there's always cards that are really good, but there are always cards that, again, just aren't. Like, they're good for something else, perhaps, yes, but they're not good for what you're doing, what your deck's specifically doing. And it's all right to, perhaps put them in your trade binder or your trade box or whatever you've got, or into another deck even. But when you go, okay, I'm going to take out this, random dragon that really doesn't do anything with what my deck's doing. It's a nice big dragon, and it does some damage to people, but that's about it. There's always going to be those cards that you just kind of scratch your head at and go, well, why is this in this deck? So obviously you want to try to find those cards that you go, and it is sometimes harder for newer players again, but if you break it down and go, okay, what does my commander do? What does my commander want me to do? And, what works well with that effect, basically. So let's take one of the more basic ones, because, again, I think newer players need to keep it basic and, or at least for a while you need to keep it basic. I wouldn't try to dive too deep into the deep end. But again, like a lot of people that, even myself and a lot of people that I know and play with, again, that's just the way we like to play. We just play fairly basic, for the most part, decks that are just like, okay, I attack you with my stuff that's on my field. That's it. That's all I've got. That's all I'm doing. Maybe I'll have a Garrick's Uprising here and there, whatnot, some sort of overrun effect. But for the most part, it's a mass, combat trick, for the most part, or whatnot. Not, literally, but, if I have an overrun, I have, I have an overrun, not I have one creature gets +3/+3, unless it's a very specific deck. There isn't a lot of decks that need a single creature. Yes, Voltron decks are a bit different, but again, for the most part, even then, you would prefer in a Voltron deck to have an aura or an equipment, and I would honestly prefer equipment over auras, because, as soon as your auras die or go to the graveyard, for the most part, in any way, you're not really getting them back, unless, of course, you've got something like Rancor. Rancor is really good, but a lot of the other ones, they just never come back from the graveyard, and it's just well, now they're stuck in the graveyard and they're never coming back, basically. So there's all those little things to consider. But anyway, let's take a deck like that. I'm playing Voltron. So one of the things might be that you might go, well, I really want to focus in on a Voltron build that, does take advantage of the graveyard. Maybe I have something, I don't know, like Muldrotha, I don't know, but you have some way of playing your artifacts or your enchantments or whatnot, some of your non-land permanents, or even your lands from the graveyard in some way as well. To me, that sounds like too much, perhaps. Like it does sound like you're trying to do too much, like you're trying to have this graveyard strategy as well. Like if you have one or two spells that happen to bring back your artifacts or enchantments and whatnot onto the battlefield, especially if they come, when you do that, they basically will equip to your commander or whatnot, then that's fine, that's really good, but yeah, like overall, I wouldn't like try to put too many things like that in there. Like if I'm getting back to like the basics of it, and I don't want to I want to give some examples, but I don't want to give too much, like too specific, like too much. This is like too not generic, like. But you know what I mean. Like if you are looking at your deck and going, I could use some recursion, that's absolutely fine, and I absolutely agree with you. Yes, you perhaps can do with some recursion, but just running like a whole bunch of stuff that's in the deck that really doesn't do much other than be like a quick reanimation isn't a lot worth it. So that's why people run like Sun Titan. Sun Titan's really good because it's like, well, it's still a 6/6 vigilance for 6, whatever. So, the fact that, it's a bit of recursion is really good, but also, again, it's a 6/6 for 6 with vigilance, so it does a lot more. Like, like you look at cards that are like that and you go, well, this is a very good card for the most part. On its own, it does a lot of stuff for me. Otherwise, that I will still want, and if it sticks around for longer and does more stuff throughout the game and whatnot, then that's really good value. And also, just like not just for me getting my stuff back, but also in getting in for combat for 6, I might kill one of my opponent's things, or they might just have to take 6. Plus, it also sticks back on defense, so that's really good as well. So you can block other people when they're trying to attack you and things like this. So there's always those little things that are like, this does not just serve one purpose. This serves multiple purposes. And perhaps that's not 100% clear. It doesn't seem that good. But, of course, people play their Eternal Witness and things like this because, again, when you've cast a spell, one of the worst things is, well, actually, you know what? I actually need access to that spell again. And, maybe I have, a couple of spells that are similar, but I'm in a real pickle and I'm in a real bind. There's nothing like I don't have any other way to draw cards right now, perhaps. That's why some of these effects that say, yes, get a card that you need from your graveyard back can be so powerful and whatnot, again, is because you have that, in the back of your deck to be like, okay, cool. This is now the point in time that this becomes, relevant. So, yeah, but getting back to it, and I want to sort of wrap up as much as possible here, but when you're upgrading a deck, again, for the most part, you're taking the whole of the deck into consideration. So the lands are a consideration again. So if you've got any tap lands that are in your deck, that you can perhaps find some more untapped lands or even just more basic lands into your deck, that will help out. Or even deck cards that sometimes enter tapped is okay. Like, it's okay that it doesn't enter untapped all the time. Like, there are cards that just won't enter untapped all the time, but at least there's that option that they will enter up untapped, sometimes more so than lands that just always enter tapped. It sounds nice, that this land enters tapped and, gives you some small upside for it entering tapped, and it doesn't sound that bad to be like, well, it's only that one turn, and then once I've gotten past that turn, now I have, access to the mana that I do need. I basically have a tapped, dual land. That's it. What's the big issue? It's not that big of an issue, perhaps, again, when you're playing on a more low level, or you're playing an entry level deck, but when you're upgrading it, that's one of the first things that you actually probably need to think about. You don't need to go out and again buy original dual lands or whatever, this sort of thing. I'll never tell anybody to do that unless you've got the budget and the means and the real necessity to do it. I did it once because I was I feel seeing how this goes. Honestly, they're not that big of an upgrade to your mana base. The same with fetch lands. There's certain decks that really want them or really need them, and whatnot. But for the most part, most decks that I build just don't have them because I don't need them. Again, same with OG dual lands. I just don't need them. What's the point? They're a very expensive card. And again, for the most part, this is a slight thing that I consider. I consider to think that when I'm upgrading a deck or when I'm trying to build a deck or whatever, I want to spend, as much money overall rather than just okay, basically all my money is caught up in these 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 cards or whatever. Most of the deck is fairly $1 to $2, or most of the deck is $5 to $6 cards, things like that. Most of the deck is on par with these cards, there it's at that kind of price range or at that power level roughly. Most of the cards are this powerful, or are this efficient that makes them more powerful, whatnot, things like that. So, again, when I'm looking at it, those are the things that I would look at and go, well, again, where am I trying to, shave some edges or, sand off some, sharp points that are just well, that could be, sanded down a bit and could be a bit better. That's mostly with, mana value, converted mana cost sort of stuff. But again, if you find a spell that is let's say, draw 3 cards for 4 mana, let's say something like that, and then you find a 2 mana spell that basically does the same thing but is also instant, it's well, that's obviously clearly a lot better. It's strictly a lot better, and the same thing for creatures. If you get a 6 mana 6/6, okay, that's fine, but if you get a 6 mana 6/6 with trample, that also, draws you cards, or also, makes you extra mana, or makes you extra, bodies or extra damage on the battlefield, or, helps you find the other pieces to your combos or whatever. Again, I'm not assuming many people at this level will use that many combos, but again, if it does more than just it's a body, it does stuff, or it doesn't really do much, or it doesn't even have evasion, then it's well, this is probably not that good. Again, I could find something better. I could find something that's cheaper. So, in terms of mana cost or whatnot. Might be more in terms of dollars, but, how much more? Again, you can find a lot of budget cards out there that are, you go, well, I didn't think that this would be $1 or this would be 50 cents or whatnot, or what have you. Endrace Forerunners, again, it's basically a 50-cent, card, but it's one of the better cards that you can put into a deck. For a finisher, if you need a finisher, and you just like, well, I need to find a finisher, and this one's in my colors and within my price range. So that's the thing, like, you've got to take all your little things into consideration, your own situation and your own deck. Like, I can offer these little, like, in general, like, tips, and I wouldn't mind actually doing a more set of specific tips for specific styles of deck. Obviously, the same is true for equipment and auras. If you're playing like a Voltron style deck, if you have an equipment that says, 3 mana plus 3 to equip, gives +1/+1 and first strike, but then you find one that's, 1 mana and gives first strike, +1/+1 trample, lifelink, or whatnot, this sort of thing, then of course, again, you're looking at a much better card. Like, for the most part, like, it does everything that last card did and more, and at a better, cost, or a lower cost in terms of mana. So you're always looking for those little things. So again, I wouldn't mind discussing like specific decks or specific strategies overall for the most part. But you guys can let me know what you think. Write your thoughts down there in the comments below. I'll be sure to try to respond to each and every one of you. I really do enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about all the things geeky that we love and whatnot. So yeah, I'll definitely see you down there in the comments below or in the next one. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out?